Hello everyone, how are you? How's everything going on? Today we will be talking about Fortigate high availability. So what is high availability? How we can configure a Fortigate in high availability HA cluster? How, like, what are the different modes of HA that can be configured on the Fortigate firewalls? And then troubleshooting the Fortigate firewalls, any issues with high availability cluster. I will be showing you all these on my lab firewalls where we are going to configure a new HA setup. I'm going to show you all the differences between the modes. I'm going to tell you about the prerequisite or the considerations that you should take care of while configuring of any FortiGate cluster. So to start with, before going or before starting to configure a FortiGate cluster, what we need to know? We need to think of like what are the different modes of high availability. So FortiGate supports two different modes that are active-active and active-passive. We have two modes of high availability. One is active-passive and the other is active-active. What exactly is the difference between active-passive and active-active? Let's talk about this. Active passive. So active passive, what happens during active passive? Let's say we are having two FortiGate firewalls and we configure them in a high availability mode in active passive mode. So in active passive mode, what is going to happen? One of the devices will be working as a primary device, and that device is known as, or we call it as, the active device. Whereas the second device will be just a standby device and will not be processing any traffic. That is just a standby, will not process any traffic. But all the configuration is going to be synchronized between both the active and passive. All the session information between the device will be synced and all configuration will be synced. But passive will only come into the active mode or will start processing the traffic once it detects that active firewall is went down or any of the interfaces of the active firewall went down. That was just a simply explanation. So if I tell you based on this, this is based on the FortiGate public documents or FortiGate articles. I just took these from there. So as I explained, an active passive cluster just is a primary unit that process the actual communication sessions. Whereas the subordinate units are connected to the network and to the primary unit, but they do not process any communication sessions. Instead, subordinate unit runs in a standby state and will only come into active mode when the primary unit fails. Okay, and at the same time, like we can have something called link monitor. So what link monitor does is we can configure link monitor to monitor the states of the interface. Let's say you have multiple interfaces on your FortiGate firewall, inside, outside, DMG, and so many other subnets possible. So if we configure a link monitor on an interface, and if that interface goes down, then there will be a failover triggered. And in that case also, the standby unit will become a primary unit and will start processing the traffic. And whereas the current active unit will change its state to the standby unit. So this is what happens in a active passive unit. The other mode is called the active active. So in active active, what happens? Both the unit process the traffic simultaneously. Both the unit can handle the traffic, and there is a load balancing between both the firewalls. There is a load balancing between both the firewalls. But one of them, or the active unit, one of them will become like a primary who initially takes the connection and distributes among the firewalls. So basically, let's say you initiate a connection or you initiate a traffic from a client. So initially that will go to one of the master unit, and master unit is going to tell the other unit that, okay, you process this traffic, or master unit is going to distribute the load between all the members in a cluster. So in active-active, there is no concept of subordinate unit. Instead, both the firewalls process the traffic and both the firewalls are able to work in a cluster and they both will be processing the traffic. Uh, I will be showing all this even in the lab, and we will be doing it like live, how to configure the HA, how to configure the HA modes. But before all this, I just thought to give you an idea on what are the different modes and how do we configure theoretical idea. Now coming to the protocols that are used for the configuration that are used by the Fortigate to form this cluster. So basically, Fortigate uses two protocols to form this high availability. These two protocols are FGCP, that we call it as Fortigate Clustering Protocol, and FGSP. FGSP is the Fortigate Session Life Support Protocol. What are the roles of these two protocols? FGCP is mainly responsible for the setup of the cluster. FGCP is the one which makes the firewall as active passive or active active. And FGSP is for the session synchronization. Let's say you have some 10,000 connections running on one firewall, on the active firewall. So FGCP will synchronize these connections even to the other units in the cluster, which will help in case of an issue or in case of a failure on the primary unit, because the connections are already synchronized onto the secondary firewall. So firewall will be able to start the communication or will be able to handle the traffic immediately, because all the session table or the TCP connection table will already be existing, it already exists on the secondary firewall. So FGSP is for session synchronization, session information, passing all the session information, and FGCP is for actual clustering. So in FGCP, what happens? Let's go deep into the FGCP. And FGCP is like FGCP handles the MAC address assignment, how the clustering works. So in FortiGate, okay, let's go to the FGCP. In FortiGate, when we enable the high availability, what happens? There is a virtual MAC address which is assigned to the interface. Uh, all the traffic in your network is going to use the virtual MAC address rather than the physical MAC address of the actual interface. And this virtual MAC address will always reside or will point to the active unit in the cluster. So let's say you have FortiGate firewall 01 and 02. So the virtual MAC address will always point to the active unit, whether it's the firewall 01 or it's the firewall 02. So this allows the end network device, the switch or the client to send the traffic to a virtual MAC address, and that in turn then passes the traffic to the active firewall. That MAC address is basically binded to the active firewall. And whenever there is a failover, that virtual MAC address changes to the other firewall in the unit, and FortiGate sends a GARP. We call it as GARP or gracious ARP, which informs the neighboring device or the directly connected device about the update of the virtual MAC. So it sends a GARP and tells the neighbor, okay, here is my new MAC address which has been changed because of a failover. Now please start sending the traffic on this virtual MAC address. So basically it just sends an update saying that this virtual MAC address has been moved from primary firewall unit interface to the secondary firewall unit interface. So the pointer for the virtual MAC address changes based on the interface, but the virtual MAC address remains the same. So it's easy for the end device without updating the MAC address. They just updates the entry and the virtual address is moved between the interfaces. Then, Okay, so as I have told you, like just to summarize, like FortiGate has got two modes in high availability: active passive and active active. In active passive, one of the unit in the cluster works as the primary unit and the other unit works as a standby or secondary unit. All the traffic is handled by the active unit, not the passive unit, but all configuration and sessions are synced between the active and passive. So in case of any failure, secondary firewall can immediately take over without creating any issues or delays on the traffic. So if there is a failover happened, you will just observe maybe one or two RTO, or that is request timed out. If you do a continuous ping to the devices and do a failover between the devices, you will just observe like one or two ping drops between the devices. That's it, because all the configuration and all the session information is already synced between the devices. In active active, both the units works active active, both unit handles the traffic, but one of the unit is always the master, which handles the load and which distributes the load uniformly across the firewalls. And then we talked about like how this H is formed between the firewalls. So the protocols used for this. So the protocol that are used are FGCP and FGSP. So FGCP is for clustering protocol, which assigns a virtual MAC address to the interface, and whereas FGSP is for the session life support protocol, which handles the session synchronization between the firewalls. As I told that for FGCP, this we for any of the, not only for FGCP, let's say for any of the modes, whether it's active active or active passive, we need to have an interface called heartbeat interface. So heartbeat interface is where both the device will be sending some keep alives with few seconds duration to know that the other member in the cluster is up and running. So if there are timeouts or if there is no heart, some consecutive heartbeats are not received on the heartbeat interface, then the device thinks or detects that my neighbor is down, and that will fail over a trigger to the other device. So Fortigate FGCP also handles this heartbeat interface traffic. So the heartbeat interface is listens on TCP port 703 and 23, or if you say on ETH layer or layer 2, this is 8890 is the ETH layer header for FGCP. Then okay, now now we know like what are the modes or which mode we should go for, whether we should go for active active or active passive. There are some other dependencies as well on different modes, like some of the features may not be supported in active active. uh, but as we know, like now we know the different modes. Now you have decided, okay, you want to go for a active active mode or a active passive mode. So as we have completed first step, so now we know which mode we have to go for. Now we need to know the requirements, like you know the mode you need to configure, but now let us know the requirement, whether my device is going to support uh, this mode, or whether both of your firewalls will be able to form a cluster. So for that, we have HA system requirements. What are the requirements when you will be able to form a HA cluster between the device? So the first and the important point for this is that both the firewalls or the hardware models must be same, and they must be running the same firmware version. Same firmware version means, if let's say firewall 01 is running firewall 01 is running let's say software version 6.4, then firewall 02 should also run 6.4 uh, software version. So this is like the first and foremost request. And the hardware model should be same as well. Let's say one of the model is 1500, then the other firewall should also be 1500. or if it's a VM with hardware memory, then I mean the memory and CPU, then even for the VM, you should have the same configuration or the resource allocation for the second firewall as well. Then after this is the one of the major considerations. After this, we have redundant network topology. So redundant network topology means if you have interface 0, 1, 0, 2 connected on one of your firewalls, then you should have the redundant topology for the second firewall also. That means you should be able to connect firewall interface 0, 1 and 0, 2 even on the secondary firewall. And you should have a HA heartbeat also. The third requirement talks about like how you can that you should have a heartbeat interface between both the firewalls, either directly connected or via a switch. But we recommend you, if it is directly connected, then it's easier, or it's no issue, no other issues from third party devices will come into the picture. So heartbeat interfaces can be connected directly between the firewalls. And the last point is heartbeat and synchronization traffic between cluster nodes occur over the physical network ports that you designate. So it's the same point which we talked in earlier. And the last point is each appliance or each or hardware model should be licensed. Means you should have a proper support or proper license for the firewall. So these are the requirements for the high availability setup. So what we know, just to summarize, the hardware model and the software version should be same on both the firewalls. You should be able to connect heartbeat interfaces between both the firewalls. And you should have a redundant network topology, that is physical cables or from different switches to from different VLANs, and it should be like synonym for both the firewalls. So you should be able to set up both the firewalls in a redundant network topology. So sorry, so in case of any issues between on the active firewall, you should be able to switch to the secondary firewall. And then coming to the configuration of the HA, how to configure the HA, I am going to show you this on the live devices. I have got some lab devices in my lab. We will be configuring the all high availability. I will be showing you the different modes available on the firewall. And after that, we will be doing all the troubleshooting, like how you can check the current status of the firewalls, check the current status of the cluster, which member is the active member, which member is the secondary member, and how you can do a failover between the devices. Let's say the current device is the active device is firewall 0, 1, but you want to make firewall 0, 2 as the active firewall. So we will be doing this troubleshooting as well. And so after this, okay, so let's start with the configuration of the high availability on our live devices. Uh, as told, so let's do the Fortigate high availability configuration on our lab devices. So I have got two firewalls, uh, and we will be configuring the high availability between these two firewalls. So as you can see, I have a firewall 0, 1 and firewall 0, 2. So before starting, as I told, what are the prerequisites? That both the firewalls should be of the same hardware model and some same software version. So you can run the command get system status, and you can see like I have a VM running 648, and it's a VM 64 kVM and running software version 6.4.8. As I will check on the other firewall as well, get system status, and I can see this firewall is also like the same VM 64 kVM and running the same software version 648.19.14. It's the same software version. So our first request is met, where we were saying both the firewalls should be same hardware and same software version. You can see VM resources, 2 CPU allowed, and even here you can see 2 CPU allowed, and I have a 2 GB of RAM and 2 GB of RAM allocated between both the devices. So we have same hardware and same software on both the firewalls. The HA configuration can be done either from the CLI or from the GUI, and but it's easy, of course, to configure it from the GUI. But once you are expert, or if you want to do it from the CLI as well, that can be done from the CLI. So let's go to firewall 01, and let's say how to configure from the CLI. You have to say config system HA, and if you do a show, you will be able to see what is the current configuration, but it's not enabled. Same here, we can see config system HA and type show, so it shows the current configuration of what is there. So as I had something already, so even we can remove this, but or we can start configuring this. So what is the important thing is, like, there is no mode configured. So by default, the mode is the standalone mode. So even if you have all this configuration, the group name, but if the mode is not configured, so by default it's it will be in the standalone mode. So standalone mode is individual firewalls. Uh, by the way, if you want to see the default configuration, then you can see here. This is all the default configuration that it's not visible if you just type so. So if you go here and you can see set mode standalone. Same way here as well, you can do, you will be able to see set mode standalone. That means currently no active mode or active mode or active passive mode is not configured, and both the firewalls are running in the standalone mode. And you are able to see all this configuration because I'm showing you even the default configuration. So if you simply type so, it shows what is configured additional. Okay, and if you type show full, it shows all the configuration, even the default configuration. But we are worried only about the current configuration, not the default configuration. So this is only the current configuration on the firewalls. So you can configure or set these parameters from the CLI and or from the GUI. So let's go to the GUI to make it easier and to understand, and then we'll see in the CLI what made the difference, like what we did on the GUI that made the difference on the CLI as well. We will be able to see what exactly even in the CLI. So let's go to our firewall. So even on the like GUI, you can see all this information here, like what is the host name, what is the firmware version running. These informations are available even on the GUI. So let's go how you will configure. On the Fortigate left hand side menu, you need to go to system and go to HA. So once you go to HA, see there is no other configuration apart from the mode. Same way on the second firewall also, if you go to system and HA, you will see the standalone mode. The high availability mode is set as standalone, and you are not able to see any other configuration. But as soon as I change this mode to, let's say, first we will start with active passive. As soon as I change this mode to active passive, you will see all these options. And same on the secondary as well. But let's first complete the configuration of the one firewall, then we will go to the second firewall. For the configuration of high availability, what is the requirement? First thing is you need to set the mode. As I told, like we have active and active passive. Let's take active passive as the configuration. Device priority. What is device priority? Device priorities, you have got two devices in the high availability, and the device with the higher priority becomes the primary or the active or master device in the cluster. So let's say the default priority of any device by default is 128. What is the default priority? Is 128. So when you are configuring, keep the device priority in mind, because this may create issues if you already have all the configurations on the one firewall. Let's say sorry. Let's say that you had configuration on one firewall, and by mistake you made the priority higher on the other device which don't have the configuration. So this is going to synchronize to the slave and all your configuration will get erased. So make sure cross check always the device priority, like which device you want to make the primary, because the configuration of the primary will automatically be syncing to the secondary. So in my case, I will make firewall 01 as the primary device. So I will increase the priority from 128 to 200 to make it the active device. The other firewall by default will be having a priority of 128. So which will be higher? 200 will be higher, and this device will become the active device or the primary device. Then the group name. You need to define a group name. So let's say for me, I am putting a just my lab name. This group name can be anything based on your environment, based on your organization, or you can simply say FGTHA group as well, or you can say the naming convention can be decided by you, anything. So this is just a group naming. Password is required. Let's say someone brings a new Fortinet. If he don't know the password, then he will not be able to modify. So password is basically like a pre-shared key or pre-shared secret between both the devices. So they will be forming an HA group if the password is same on both the device. So either you can change this. This is there is something default password. You can change. Let's say I will put some password here, uh, and the same password needs to be configured on the other device. I was telling you about monitor interfaces or the link monitor. So monitor interfaces is basically firewall is going to monitor these interfaces. If any of the interfaces which are configured in monitor interfaces goes down, then there will be a failover triggered. So for now, I'm not going to configure any monitor interface. And heartbeat interface. Heartbeat interface is the one on which both the firewalls will continue send some keep alive messages, or we say heartbeat messages. If the heartbeat messages are received, if the heartbeat messages are not received from the other device for some consecutive tries, then the device considers itself as a and will switch over to the active, or will consider the neighbor as the down. So that's called the heartbeat interface. Then we have got management interface reservation. What is management interface? See, both the firewalls will having one of the management interface. But once you configure a HA, as you know, all the configuration will be synchronized between the devices. And in Fortigate, the interface IP, the interface IP remains same on both the firewalls. Let's say Fortigate 1 is having an interface IP of 1.1. The same IP will exist even on the Fortigate 2, because they handles this via the FGCP protocol, and virtual MAC takes care of it. As I told you earlier, like in FGCP, it assigns a virtual MAC to all the interfaces, which points to the interface or the IP address accordingly. So there is only a single IP address in FortiGate. So if you see like other vendors, let's say for Cisco, in Cisco you have got some called primary IP and the standby IP. In Cisco ASA, we have got primary IP and standby IP. But in FortiGate, it's only one IP. Similarly, even in the Palo Alto, you have got primary IP and standby IP, or secondary IP in any other vendors. But in FortiGate, we have got only one IP. So if you select management interface and you decide which interface is the management interface, in your case, maybe it's management 1 or management 2. So FortiGate is not going to synchronize the IP address or the routing for the management interface. So what will be the benefit of it? The benefit will be you will be independently managing both the firewalls using the management IP. But if you don't do management interface reservation, then you will be always landing onto the active firewall whenever you try to log in using the management IP. So it always takes you to the management or the active firewall. So I'm not selecting this for now because I have a virtual VM, so I don't have a separate management interface for now. And unicast heartbeat. What is unicast heartbeat? When the two devices are in the cluster, they do this heartbeat as a broadcast, or they send it to a group, multicast group. But if you don't want that multicast to happen, you can select the unicast heartbeat. Unicast heartbeat will be the one-to-one communication on a specific IP. So if you select unicast heartbeat, you need to mention the peer IP. But the general recommendation is like keep it as the default, because the heartbeat interfaces generally we will connect directly. So the good practice is to keep the default one, but unicast can be can be selected if you don't want multicast to happen, or if you are in a VLAN where there are other multiple devices might be connected, or your heartbeat interface is not a directly connected interface. Instead, it is going via switch, and where there might be some other members, and you don't want to send this multicast traffic to to the entire port. In that case, unicast heartbeat can be selected. So now you know mode, the mode, whether it's active or active passive. Device priority defines which device is going to become the master and which device is going to the slave, or you can say primary and secondary. Group name, the group name should be common across both the firewalls. Password should be same between the firewalls. Session pickup, session pickup is where the FGSP comes into the picture. So the session synchronization. By default, configuration will be synchronized. But if you want to do a session synchronization between both the firewalls, like all the connection table on one firewall should be synchronized to the other, then we select the session pickup enable. So this, if you select this, it is session pickup enable. And once these settings are selected, you need to click on OK. It's enabling the high availability, and let us wait for some time, and then we can see like high availability is configured and ready. Now meantime, let's go to the secondary firewall. Similarly here as well, we will select on now, as you can see I am on the secondary firewall. Here as well we are going to select the mode active passive, but properly take care of the device priority. By mistake, if you made the secondary device or the one which you want to be secondary as the higher priority, the configuration on your other device, you may lose all the configuration, because the configuration from the active unit or from the primary unit syncs to the secondary unit. So always keep in mind about the priority, and please double check it before clicking OK. So as I can see, I have it, but the default one, which is 128. If you go to this it tells you the description. The device with the highest priority is more likely to become the HA primary. Then I have the group name, and as I told, the password has to be similar on both the device. Not similar, it's exactly same. I have to do session pickup enable. I am not doing any monitor interface for now. And the heartbeat interface. Heartbeat interface is the one directly connected interface. And I am not touching the management interface reservation and unicast heartbeat. So I am going back to the primary firewall or the firewall 01. You can see the uh, high availability is enabled, and it's showing the priority as 200, host name, and the role, the uptime, the sessions, everything it's showing. But it's only showing one device. It's not showing the other device. Why it's not showing the other device? Because we have not enabled it here yet. Once it's enabled, both the firewalls will discover each other using the heartbeat interface, and then it will be showing in the group. So let's click OK here. So now I enabled high availability even on the secondary device. Now go back to the primary device and let's do a refresh. So when you are doing refresh, it will show you the status of both the device. So it's why it's still not showing is because the other device is enabling it. It's still not enabled. Once it's enabled, then we will be able to see on the primary device like both the firewall should appear here. Let's wait for some time. It takes few seconds. We can see like it's not showing the other device. This is a good test case as well where we can do the troubleshooting like why it's not showing or why the device is not being is not joining the cluster. Let's wait for some time, otherwise we'll go to our uh, HA and we'll be checking what is the issue. Okay, meantime, let's again check the configuration of the HA. What change has been done here? And let's do so. Okay, so as we saw earlier, what was the configuration here? The configuration earlier was just the group name and heartbeat interface was set, but there was no mode. So once we configured it from the GUI, we can see like set mode, active passive, and we did session pickup enable, and we set the priority to 200. So we can see like all the configuration even in the CLI. So from the CLI you can simply do a config system HA and you can type, so it will be showing the configuration. Let me see if the other device came up. Other device is still not coming up. Let me go to the CLI and let's do some debug. Okay, not debug, but before that, let's get into the troubleshooting part. Let's do get system HA. Get system HA is the configuration which you can see. Either first we did config system HA, and here we can see the configuration get system HA. So you can see the group ID 0, mode active, the password, heartbeat interface set is port 6, session sync device. So this get system HA helps us to all the parameters that are configured. Then we have to do get system HA status. So get system HA status, we can see the cluster uptime, like we have configured it just 5 minutes back. So we can see the cluster is up since 5 minutes, but it's not showing the secondary device yet. It's only showing the primary device. Okay, primary device 23. This is the primary device which shows DC firewall 01, but we are not able to see the secondary device. Get, oh, why it's not typing? Get system HA status again. So get system HA status is similar to our GUI page when we are doing this refresh. This is also get system HA status itself. But still it's not showing the other device. Let me check what happened to the second device. It's still not coming. Let's check what's happening on the device. So for this case, we can use diag debugs. So what we have to do, we have to do diag debug, uh, diag debug application HA talk and -1. So because I was configuring and issue came, so I am starting the troubleshooting session now itself. So diag debug application HA talk -1 means we are starting the debug for HA. -1 is basically the level, uh, the debug level. And after typing this, we have to say diag debug Why it's not typing? Sorry. We have to say, diag debug application HA talk -1, and we have to say diag debug enable. So now we will be able to see the messages between both the device, what communication is going on. We can see like this device is sending HA priority state change time. Now this is the work mode, means it's the current device, and HA priority primary change time work. It's continuously sending the HA heartbeat messages to the other device, but we don't see anything from the uh, secondary device. So let's go to the secondary device. Let's go to the secondary device and we'll see why this is not working. Diag debug application HA talk -1 and diag debug enable. What this guy is saying. This guy is also saying like I am the work, I am not able to detect the other. So maybe it could be an issue because of the password we set or the group name. If they are not matching, then both will not be. So this guy is also now in a work mode, that means active, and it's continuously sending the heartbeats. And at the same time, the firewall 01 is also saying I am the active, and it's continuously sending the heartbeats, but it's not receiving anything from the other device. So now let's check what is missing or what mistake we did. Or maybe I will set the password again or the group name. Let me check the group name. Yep. So here is our problem. As you can see, here I have set the group name as the FGT HA group, but on the other device, I have the group name as Rosa Lab group. What is the problem? Group name mismatch. So this is like something, yeah, if the group name is not matching, then yes, the HA will not be forming. So now we'll do set group name Rosa Lab group. I'm making the similar name as it was on the other device, Rosa Lab group, and enter. So now, yeah, as soon as we made the group name same, we can see all this talk started in the CLI. We can see all messages appeared and they formed a cluster. This status is changed now, and it sends a gratuitous ARP, it sends is selected as the HA port. So this we are seeing all these messages because we enable the debug. So we enable the debug using diag debug application HA talk -1. But now as we don't need, I will be disabling the debugs diag debug disable, and at the same time I will also disable on my other box diag debug disable. So now I disabled on both the boxes. Now let's as because during the configuration itself we saw the issue. It's good. We made a mistake and we know what was the mistake. The mistake was the group name is not same on both the devices. But meantime, let me tell you about these debugs as well. How do we identify? Like what is the cause? See, before when the group name was not same, we can see like this device is sending the heartbeat and saying I am the work. My status is work, means he is a active device and sending the messages. But we don't see something coming back from the other device. As soon as we created or we matched the device name, what happened? It happened like, let's say this group name was set. It sends a message with the new group name and it says CFG is changed to 1. Now because both the group names are same, then HTalk sends all ARP messages. Before that, it sets the port 6 as the heartbeat interfaces. It sends the ARP messages with the virtual MAC. Then it assigns all the virtual IP to the secondary firewall, because I told that the configuration will be synchronized. So this configuration of the IP address is being synchronized. Then again, it's like related to the heartbeat messages going on between them, and we can see member has been updated and HAV cluster function, and they selected the members. Once they selected the members, then you can see all talk going on and it's all normal. So if you go back to the GUI and if you do a refresh here, you can see both the device appeared here. And why it's showing as out of sync is basically it is trying to synchronize the configuration between the device, and it takes some time to for all synchronization. The same status, if you check from the CLI also, you need to do get system HA status, and you will be able to see both the members. Who is the primary? Primary is the DC firewall 01. Who is the secondary? Firewall 02. Why firewall 01 is the primary? Because 2397. If you go 2397 is selected primary because it has the highest, largest value of override priority. Because we had configured the priority 200, which is higher than the other member, which was 128. So once both the devices are in the cluster, you will be able to see the memory, everything. So now our cluster is ready, and even we did some troubleshooting like how to enable the uh, debugs for HA. So the debugs will be direct debug application, HA talk, and then you need to put the debug level. Debug level ranges from -1 to 255, and being -1 the highest level for this. So this is how to enable the debug. Then we talked about the how to check the status, get system HA status. You will be able to see the current status, and you can see like the configuration is now synchronized. So if you go back to the GUI and if you check the same thing on the GUI as well, you will be should be able to see synchronized. Yeah, see, you will be able to see synchronized. So the synchronized in the GUI is similar here on the CLI, that it's in sync. If you want to see what the parameter are configured, you can do a get system HA. It shows the device name, what is the mode, all the parameters, what is the heartbeat interval, heartbeat loss threshold, GARP, whether it should send a GARP to the neighboring devices, or if you sorry, excuse me, and if you want to see the configuration, config system HA, and you do a show, you will be able to see the configuration. So I hope this was useful to you. Yeah, there is one more thing which I am missing, which is let's go to our PPT first. So we have done the configuration of the and troubleshooting. I told you get system HA status, okay, and diagnose sys HA checksum cluster. So this command basically helps you when there are configuration sync issues. Like earlier we were able to see like configuration it was showing as not synchronized. So if you do a diagsys HA checksum cluster, it takes the checksum of the configuration from both the device, and you will be able to figure out like what configuration change is causing this issue or which is not matching between the device. So you can see here the checksum is matching between the primary and the secondary firewall. So it's based on the VDOM, global, root, and all. So if you see all this from the primary firewall is exactly same in the secondary firewall. So that means the configuration is properly synchronized. So this diagnosis HA checksum cluster can be used to troubleshoot the issue related to the not synchronized issues, related to not synchronized or any configuration issues. So one more thing, as we had enabled session pickup, yeah. So if you do a command call diagsys session session status, sorry, Dax is session state. This command shows you all the session information, like how many connections currently exist. We can see like there are total 24 connections passing through this firewall, and 14 out of them are in established state. We enabled session pickup. You remember we had enabled session pickup. Now if you go to the secondary firewall, and if you, I'm disabling the previous debugs. Okay, now if you do a diaxis session state on this as well, you should be able to see the same number of connections here as well. Now it's reduced. Why? Maybe it reduced on the other firewall as well. Let's see. Yeah, so here also it's reduced, and even you will see the same thing here as well. So this is called session pickup. If you go back to the GUI, if you see the refresh the page, you will be able to see the sessions are being synchronized between the firewall. So that's all about HA. Yeah, session pickup is enabled, so we can see that the sessions are also being synchronized between the device, and we can see all the device in the HA, and it's proper what is all these informations are synced. And you can see in the GUI, see there is a heart on the interface. So this heart means that this interface is configured as the heartbeat interface for this HA cluster. So hope this was useful for everyone, and this will help you to configure and troubleshoot your next HA setup for the FortiGate. And if you do have any questions regarding high availability between the device, then you can just simply post a comment on this video. I will be happy to assist you with, and any questions related to FortiGate or any setup. So I will be happy to assist you. Thank you guys. Thank you so much, and look forward for my next videos from my side. And I will be happy if you can subscribe my channel, and you can like, comment, share and subscribe about this. And all the questions and inputs are most welcome. I will be happy to make videos or guide you in your FortiGate setups. I am very happy to assist customers, people, persons with their own FortiGate configuration, with their own any kind of network and IT security configuration. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.